All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Yongxiang Lu. I'm a professor in electrical and computer engineering. I'm also the director of a newly established John Mattison Entrepreneurship Center. Today we have the unusual pleasure to organize this online panel on the topics of building extraordinary careers in economic uncertainty. So this panel is co-organized by the John Mattison Entrepreneurship Center, Purdue Foundry, Quintus School of Management, and the Silicon Valley Boilermaker Innovation Group. I have only a few things I want to share just to get the topic moving. I think I don't have to really tell you that the world has changed. This is a picture taken in Times Square about half an hour ago on a sunny day in spring. It's almost empty. What's going on? Right, so the world has changed. If you pay attention to
we can't see your screen.
You cannot? Okay. Let me do it again. Okay. Thank you for telling me that. Can you see now?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so there's a lot of scary news out there. 30 million people have filed unemployment claim, a lot of layoffs, and even universities are in difficult situation. I don't know about Purdue, but we'll hear from Purdue soon. So in response to this unusual time, I have working with several organizations to assemble an unusual panel. I'm not going to read their bio. Their bio is online, and I encourage you to check out their experience. I'm sure you are not here to listen to me. You are here to listen to our panelists. So this is what we're going to do. I will give each panelist 5 minutes to share their view. And to reduce the problem of echo, we'll ask you to submit your questions by typing instead of enabling microphone and create a lot of echo. Some of you have already submitted your questions in advance. I have shared your questions with the panelists, and if necessary, I will read the questions. If you are interested in any particular topic, please go to this website. It's the JMEC, John Mattison Entrepreneurship Center /activities. There's a form you can fill in to suggest topics, or you can nominate yourself as a speaker. So now I'm going to enable Beth. Now it's yours.
Okay, so let me just say something. As an entrepreneur, I see this as a huge opportunity because all the expectations that are out there in the world are not there. And if people think they're there, then you've got a chance to kind of jiggle it loose and say, well, maybe not. So I think with this title I put down, It's a New World, that's really what I'm trying to speak to, because everybody talks about, or oftentimes people think about being an entrepreneur as being a really scary, weird place, and it is in some sense, but really the whole world now is opened up to thinking differently, because there's just so much that's not going to work the way we've done it before. So I think that's one of the huge, I'll say, silver banners of the whole COVID pandemic. So really for folks that like to think differently, and I think there's probably a number of you on this call, this is an opportunity to start to really rethink things, whether it's products, markets, all kinds of stuff. Everything is up for grabs. So one of the things that I want to emphasize is this next point, that well, I talked about the opportunities. A lot of times people have a sense of loss with something like this. And so feel those feelings, don't discount them, but also remember to flip the coin over and start to see what the possibilities are, because all those assumptions have changed. And I think that it's up to you to start to think differently about assumptions that maybe were there that aren't there, and wow, how could that be different to create a new opportunity in some fashion? And then that leads to, when you start to question those assumptions, then you can start to really begin to reshape your perspective on the world. And that's when the new ideas start to roll. It's really the basis of starting to get that creativity rolling in a different way. Those oldest assumptions that you have personally, and as well as what society has, or the way things have always been done, is really the opportunity in here. And one of the things I'll just say quickly, because I was looking through the questions that Young had sent us a little while ago, is anytime you have an expectation that something's going to happen, there's an assumption in there that things are going to work the way they have in the past. And right now, I think that's very dangerous. And I put down it was pretty much going to lead to some kind of disappointment. So, well, as you should question all those expectations and assumptions, don't automatically follow the line of thinking that you've held in the past, because one, you're missing out on opportunities, and two, you will most likely be disappointed. And I think the last couple bullet points are, be open to create new expectations and new ways of thinking. Have conversations with people who think differently, who approach things differently, because now is the time to really start to tap into that different way of looking at stuff. And then that's where the creative juices really get started. The one thing I would like to, I guess, just reiterate here is all this stuff I put on this slide, it's very relevant today, but you guys are just getting started with your life. This is a great way to put down a template, if you will, for how to handle things in your life that don't work the way you expect or the way you would like them to, because that's what life's all about. So really, you're embarking on a wonderful trip, and you just get to start out of the gate with a bang. So start to shift your thinking and see it as an opportunity out there right now versus, oh my gosh, everything's broken and falling apart. So, want to add anything, Peter? Okay.
That's good.
All right. That's my 5 minutes there, Young. So.
Peter?
Great. So I'll start off with a little bit of a story. So when I graduated from Purdue way back when, we were just going through a big thing called Black Monday, which was the biggest one-day stock drop in history. So it certainly isn't as bad as what we're struggling through today, but it does have its parallels, right? Their job market had shriveled up to nothing. People were talking about not making nearly as much money, or maybe even not having positions when we graduated from school. So what we did then, though, is, plus we had the extra difficulty. Beth and I were both graduating at the same time, and we wanted to move to a city that we could both get jobs in and perhaps switch jobs later on, but we didn't want to work for the same company. So we had some limitations on where we wanted to go. Black Monday was out there, so times were tight. So what we did, though, is instead of just casting around and trying to find something, what we did is we shifted from searching to having a vision. And that's what I want to talk about today. The challenge that you have today is not to run around looking and hoping some magic will happen, but to figure out what the heck it is that you want to make a difference in your life and focus and making it happen. And what I ended up doing back at Purdue when we were graduating back in '89 is I said, okay, what towns or cities do we want to live in, right? We didn't want to go to New York, didn't want to go way out here to California because that was too crazy for us at the time. So we picked a couple of the cities, and St. Louis was on the top of that list. And we said, okay, what are some of the companies that are there? Are there enough companies that in case one of us gets laid off or something bad happens, because big time job reduction was taking place at the same time. If we ended up happening, how could we move around? So St. Louis was like, okay, perfect size company, perfect size city, and a lot of different companies out there. So we targeted that, and we looked at companies that were out there. But none of the companies that I was interested in were coming to Cranmer to interview. So what I had to do instead was be open to possibilities. And what I did is I found a company that was coming in here, but they weren't coming to Cranmer. And I ended up tracking down the lead recruiter for the company and made a breakfast appointment. I remember a 7 o'clock breakfast appointment with him down at the union, and I made it happen. I pursued it with passion. And I remember very specifically, he was so impressed that I knew so much about the company that I was able to schedule time with him, and that I was sitting there at 7 o'clock in the morning having breakfast with this guy to make it, even though they didn't have a job for me. They pretty much hired me on the spot because they were so impressed with my creativity, right? My persistence, my ingenuity to make it all happen. And even though they didn't have a job specifically that they were hiring for, they said, we'll figure it out, we'll make it happen. And that's what I want to talk about today, that there's always opportunities, but you get to create them. In other words, you can't sit around and wait for something to happen. It's important for you, especially as you're getting started in your career, is to think about what it is that you want. Not just the short term, what do you want this week or this month, or I need a job, but what is it that you want for your life? Think about that. Think about things that are important. Have that vision in your head, and then, and only then, get out there and make it happen. And then be aware that it's a journey, right? It's not a destination. You don't ever get there. You're always here. You never get there. So think about it as you're going through. Be aware, don't give up, and keep pushing through. But always keep in mind what it is that's important to you. Okay?
That's terrific,
Great.
Beth and Peter. Really perfect setup and lead into what I wanted to talk about. So Young asked me to talk about developing the entrepreneurial mindset. And I want to talk a little bit about this. So the top of this slide has a quote from Eric Ries's book, The Lean Startup, which I thought was incredibly appropriate for our day and time, that his definition of a startup is a human institution, a business, a nonprofit that's designed to create new products and services under conditions of extreme uncertainty. I suspect we would all agree that right now we're living in conditions of extreme uncertainty. The entrepreneur looks at that as, man, that means there's a lot of opportunity out there. There are people who are in fast retreat. There are people who don't know, we don't know what the world's going to look like in 6 months in the post-COVID days, which means there are opportunities for us to create that future. And I don't want to be Pollyannish about it, but I believe that this is an opportunity to really do some extraordinary things. The second point that Ries makes in his book is that an entrepreneur is anyone who works in a startup. And so my point to you all, and I would guess many of you starting your careers as I did, and probably most of the other panelists, we started with a big company and then worked progressively smaller and hopefully built some companies from small to somewhat larger. That I would argue that any of you are working in a startup right now. Any of your companies are most likely in a period of extreme uncertainty. And there are things then you can learn in your current situation that will enable you to be a successful entrepreneur down the road. I started my career at the drug company, Eli Lilly and Company, after finishing pharmacy school at Purdue. And I've always referred to Lilly as my postgraduate education. A chance to learn from people who had encountered most of the problems before and had ways to solve them. Another resource that I found I thought really was interesting in talking about 5 characteristics of the entrepreneurial mind. And we just kind of talk a bit about those and maybe a bit about my experience. But first off is decisive. One of the things that when we were at Lilly, and I think coming out of school quite often, you feel like you need to know every data point to make a decision. The reality is when you're running a business, especially a smaller business, you don't have all the data. You've got to be comfortable saying yes or no, buy or sell with maybe 50% of the data you'd love to have. I used to be in this company. We had a huge market research library. It was every fact you could want to know. I went to a really small company with 3 people. There was very little that we knew. You've just got to get comfortable dealing with those and being decisive when you don't know all the data. The second point of confidence, and the argument or the point here really is that you need to get comfortable acting like that you know what you're doing when you really don't know what you're doing, and you know that you don't know what you're doing. And I still remember early in my career I was working for a a small business, a 500-person company, and I was running a division doing clinical studies of consumer pharmaceutical products, and got a call from one of our clients who asked if we could do a clinical trial of this new drug in a shopping mall. And I, of course, said, sure, we can do that. And here's what we can do. And I remember hanging up the phone and going to my team and saying, you won't believe what I just told someone we could do. We figured out how to do it. It ended up being our biggest product line within a couple of years and selling millions of dollars of these kinds of studies. But again, you just, sometimes it's not being stupidly overconfident, but you just got to, get comfortable. You don't know what you're doing necessarily, and you'll figure it out. The third point is accountability. When you're a big organization, quite often you've got a boss, and you've got a boss who's telling you what to do, and what the expectations are, and your job in many ways is to make her happy with what you're doing. When you go out and you're starting up a new company, the person you're accountable to is yourself. So as you're thinking about where you are in your career right now, think about how you can demonstrate to your boss, to yourself, that you are accountable. You're going to hold accountability, and you'll do what you promise you're going to do. You'll deliver on the quality and on time that you want to do. The fourth point here, resilience. It's not stubbornness, and my point is, the analogy I've heard people use is if you're a pilot and you're flying from New York to Miami, and there's a 100-knot wind going from east to west. If you don't change your course periodically, you're going to end up in St. Louis. And we know it's a great city, but maybe that's not where you wanted to go. And so it's a point about being able to make in-course corrections, pivots, as we'll talk about it, as we talk a lot about in entrepreneurship. How you make the mid-course corrections that enable you to get to where you want to go. And back to the point that Peter made, or Peter, Beth, I forget now, about have a view, have a vision, know where you're going, and so make the corrections you need to make along the way to get you there. And the last point is humility. And especially working in the last couple of startups that I've done were founded by academic founders who are really smart people. Sometimes they were a little too smart for their own good. And the point is, if you're the smartest person in the room, you probably need to find another room, because you need to put your really good people around you who are smarter than you. So go again. The overall point here is that in your, if you're working in a bigger company right now, you've got the ability to act like and think like an entrepreneur. It'll set you up very well for that next stage in your career if you decide you want to go start a company. I would also say that someone who acts like an entrepreneur is extremely valuable in any company. So thanks, Youngie. I really appreciate being here today.
Thank you. So next one is Mayfield.
Great. Thanks, Young. So thank you for the invitation. Glad to be here. And so I'd like to talk, specifically to those of you that are possibly interested in taking an idea forward, forming a business around it, or if you're a researcher, maybe taking some technology that's come out of your research and commercializing that. So as many of you might know, we have a great process at the Foundry, the Firestarter program. We also have the National Science Foundation I-Corps program, which are built around the assumption that what you need to do at the front end, if you've got an idea or a technology, is to get out of the building and go and talk to potential customers and stakeholders, not to sell them your idea, but to test all of the assumptions that you're making about who the customer is, what needs and problems they have associated with the job that they're doing, and how to form a business model that's going to be able to successfully take your idea or technology forward. So we've of course in the past have focused very heavily on doing these what we call customer discovery interviews on a face-to-face basis. We really have the opportunity to have a more of a deeper conversation with the person you're interviewing. But I guess the good news is that all of these programs now, Firestarter, the National Science Foundation I-Corps program, we're running 2 programs right now out of the Midwest I-Corps node. We're running a national program for SBIR Phase 1 recipients. We're also kicking off tomorrow a regional program with 25 teams from across the Midwest. And those are all online. And so we're starting to get some good experience about this. We've had one tranche of national programs that have been online. And so what we've learned is customer discovery can be done in this time of COVID-19, that using video conferences is actually working pretty well. So we're finding a great deal of comfort of many people in using that as our primary means of interacting these days. And so as what used to be a kind of second tier mode of interviewing is now out of necessity our first tier, but it's working pretty well. We're also seeing that a lot of trade shows and conferences, which are really helpful in connecting with people that are associated with a particular industry vertical or a technology or a market area, they're going online now. And so there's still a different way of engaging, but a great opportunity to engage with a large number of people that are associated with the kind of product market space that you're interested in. LinkedIn has always been our friend, and it continues to be our friend. If you don't, you should have a premium account so that you can connect with potential alumni that can give you warm introductions to people you want to talk to. Google's also our friend. It's a little disturbing how much information is available on any of us online. So we can do plenty of research, also find out where those trade shows and conferences are. And as far as the people we want to interview, they're presumably not using their work phone numbers as working at home. But the good news in that is that there are no administrative gatekeepers sort of keeping us out of their building, keeping us out of their offices. And the experience of people doing these interviews is a finding that people are a lot more informal, a lot more relaxed. So when you remove people from their palatial office suites, they're sitting in their basement or sitting in their attic. So the interaction is actually a lot friendlier and more relaxed than it had been in the face-to-face world. That being said, there's some customer discovery we're struggling with, and so if you're dealing with frontline health people, first responders, healthcare workers, delivery network, telemedicine, if your potential solution does really not help make people get healthier, safer, more productive, then you're not going to get the time of day and probably shouldn't be wasting their time because they've got more important things to focus on. So I think one of the things that we see particularly is when we're engaging with someone that we don't know virtually, we have to be very attentive to being empathetic, acknowledge there's a new normal, recognize that the person that we're talking to may be involved with a business that is shutting down, maybe in travel, entertainment, hospitality. They may be worried about their personal job, and so really need to be sensitive to the fact that they're not living in the normal world, and they may be more concerned about their personal situation than you might expect. I guess the last point I'd make is that if you're in the process of building a business model around your idea, or if you've already got a business model around it, if it looks the same as it did 3 months ago, I think as Steve Blank says, you're probably living under a rock. You've got to think about what the new normal is going to be. The competitive landscape is going to be very different. The companies that survive through this are not going to be all the ones that are out there right now. We're going to be facing different regulatory environment, different reimbursement environment, and different distribution channels. And so I think go back to what Beth said at the beginning, that change represents both danger and opportunity, but it's going to be a very different world, and because of the differences, that provides opportunities that we can uncover and respond to. So encourage you not to sit in your hands and wait for this to be over. This is a good time to get out, not physically but virtually, and connect with potential customers, stakeholders, key opinion leaders that can sort of help you validate all of the assumptions that are critical to the success of taking your idea or technology forward. So thanks for the time. Enjoyed talking to you all.
Rich?
All right, thanks. So this is the summary of my slide right up front. Cash is king. So when you're looking for opportunities, follow the money is the best thing to keep in mind. So I'll just give you a little perspective on when I graduated, when I got out of school, was in 1982, as my daughter likes to say, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. But just to put that in perspective, a lot of you probably don't know this, but between the Great Depression in the 20s and now, the highest unemployment in the United States was 1982 when I got out of school. Worse than the 2008 Great Recession, as it was called. And so I can relate to what you're going through. Very difficult. I had a industrial engineering degree from Purdue, and I just finished my MBA at Harvard. And with industrial engineering background, I wanted to work in manufacturing. I was going to go conquer the world and wanted to do, robotics and automated assembly lines and all this great stuff. And literally, I did all kinds of homework. I wrote to the president of every robotics manufacturer in the United States and followed up with phone calls, very aggressive with every one of them. And, I ended up, getting handed off to like the head of HR, and they said, wow, great resume. Love to have a guy like you, but we just have a total hiring freeze on. We are not hiring anyone. And so to Beth's comment about, being flexible and being opportunistic, I ended up coming out to California, and I don't even think it was called Silicon Valley at the time. I mean, just to put it in perspective, the IBM PC was only introduced a year before in 1981. So the whole idea of personal computer was still very new and a small business. And I moved out to California, and it worked out, and I followed the opportunity, even though it wasn't really the industry that we're in today. Things were happening here. It was where the cash flow was, where the growth opportunities were. And even though I was a small town Midwestern guy who had no thoughts of moving to San Francisco, California, I ended up out here, and it all worked out. So, follow the cash, follow the money, where the opportunity is. And this is important no matter what size, whether it's a small business or a large business. And it's not just, big companies are safe, because it's not, it's cash flows. It's not just how much cash they have in the bank, as we're seeing with some retails and airlines and other big companies right now. They are burning through the cash so fast. And so, look at the cash flow, not just how much money they have, and look for those kinds of opportunities. A lot of companies right now are in this mindset of survival, not how to grow, but how to just survive. And they're in a hunkered down mindset. The strongest, however, these are opportunity times. I remember Intel saying that they gained their most market share right after recessions, because they kept investing into the recessions, where their competition was all hunkered down with their head hidden under a rock. And this is how you can profit if you have the right kind of company. And again, got to look at the cash, because if you don't have any cash, if you're strung out with debt, then those companies can't afford to invest during the downtimes. They are in pure survival mode. So look for those who aren't in survival mode, who are ready for these kind of opportunities, because this is the time when companies become great, whether they're startups or bigger companies. If you can survive this, if you can invest into coming out of it, that's when you gain market share. That's when you have the best opportunity to grow. So when you're looking at cash flows within the organizations, again, looking for what departments are going to be the opportunities and other things like that, and what segments of industry, forecasting supply chain are in turmoil right now. So you have to look at where it's going to get cut. The first thing companies cut is advertising. So if you're trying to get a job in advertising, it's going to be really hard right now. It's the first thing that gets cut, even before people get cut second. And that, as you can see, is happening as well. But again, there are lots of companies that are growing right now. Video conferencing companies are growing, delivery companies are growing. Amazon is I mean, they can't even hire fast enough. It's unbelievable how fast they're growing right now. So there are opportunities. Look for those. Look for those that you think are going to come out of this the earliest. Some are going to take longer, but some of them are going to come out very quickly, and those are going to be the good ones. The other thing is as other folks said, you got to do your homework. You've got to stand out because you've got more competition right now. You can't just, wave your Purdue degree and say, oh, look, I went to this great school, hire me. You've got to be the aggressive one. You've got to be targeted. You got to do your homework and show that if they're going to hire anyone, you're the one they want to hire, as Peter mentioned. And this goes for startups again, as well as big companies. Startups, I'm on a board, a couple of boards and advisory to a couple of startups that are either pre-revenue or very early revenue and weren't expecting to just grow our revenue phenomenally. And we're doing fine right now because we weren't expecting to ramp the revenue very quickly. And we're well funded, and you just stay very focused and stay on track. And some of those companies I'm involved with are hiring right now. In fact, one of them is a chip company that just can't find enough talented people, even still. So fundraising can be a challenge at these times. There are some VCs who kind of get frozen like others, but the smartest VCs, and I was with Foundation Capital for 11 years, we viewed these as great investment opportunities because some of our peer VC firms were frozen. We saw this as an opportunity to get in the best deals at great prices. People were less valuation sensitive and wanted to just make sure they had money in the bank, as is smart for entrepreneurs. And so we got into some great companies at times like this. So, again, don't just feel like you can't get into a startup. Startups are hiring, big companies are hiring, but follow the money. And that'll lead you into the best opportunities. Thanks.
Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So like Rich, I came out of college in 1982 and landed my first job in 1983. It was a very, very tough time. The ideal target place was to go to Bell Labs in New Jersey. I wanted to be, they were very prestigious at the time, and they were frozen because they were divesting. So I pivoted and I went to one of these regional companies that were emerging. And I wound up, you have some music in the background? Getting my Academy Award warning notice. There we go. And I wound up going to Pacific Telesis. And what I didn't, and what I would coach you in the interview, what I did in the interview was I told them what types of problems I could solve for them that would help them on optimized routing and how to drive money out of operations. And I hit it off with the hiring managers and wound up landing a job, making the pivot to a different company, and then making the pitch about what I could do for them and telling them right off the bat and kind of aggressively going after it. Companies with good balance sheets, as Rich was talking about, and cash flow, they're going to continue at reduced levels. The Googles and the ones I'm talking to in the Valley, the larger companies, they're still going to continue to hire. But having worked as a vice president in several large companies, the MO for these guys is they love to, it's the old Jack Welch model, they purge X% of their employees annually, bottom 4 to 7%. They wait a few months and then they hire back some of the top grads across the board, which would be people from Purdue. And you need to try to understand the cadence of these companies when they go down and these downsizing and then building back up. And if you listen to the investor calls, the earnings calls that are quarterly for these companies, you can get tremendous insights as to what they're facing, what their problems are, and you can try to figure out how you can align yourself to that need. I think that's key. In COVID-19, the behaviors are here to stay. Most of the CEO stuff I'm reading says that, telecommuting used to be an issue of trust, and now it's going to be a dominant force because these large corporations downsize their office footprints by putting everybody in these collaborative rooms. And now with the spacing you need for COVID-19, there's a tremendous pressure to not buy more real estate, but to let more people telecommute. So I believe and I believe it's working very well for everybody. So I think telecommuting will continue to surge. Businesses with less touch points, I think that's something to look for. They'll be emerging. Video conferencing is an obvious one, what we're doing here right now. Remote collaboration, and it goes on. The real question is which of these companies are going to innovate, pivot, and thrive? How are you going to rethink your customer engagement model? My buddy Steve Pride and I just talked. He runs Pride Wineries up in Napa, very successful winery. And he said that he's making more money this year with no customers coming to his winery than he did last year. And so they've rethought their customer engagement model at something that they thought was really dependent upon people coming into their establishment, and it's not. So this is a ripe area for the JMEC. The JMEC, the student organizations on campus are very well connected. And I don't know if it was Beth or Peter or someone earlier said you want warm handoffs. Those are really the key and helpful to helping you land a job. I want to go to the next slide. There we go. So I'm the person at the JMEC Silicon Valley office, and the focus and the goal of what we're trying to do in this office is improve Purdue engineering student placement right here in Silicon Valley. And that's got to do with internships and co-ops and full-time jobs. So the way I go about it is I utilize Purdue's network and contacts in the Valley, and believe me, there's no shortage of that. I work with the network with the Purdue alumni, with Adam Crum, the guy who leads it out here. I network with SV Big, Steve Vandahar. I'm not sure if he's on the call, but just a tremendous asset, especially to me, helping me get plugged in. And then I utilize the network that I've built in Silicon Valley over the 25 plus years I've worked in the Bay Area. The SV Big org is a website you can go to. I post, when I meet with a lot of these companies, I post their jobs that they have, whether it's for internships or recent grads. And you can see there was an internship webpage in svbig.org, and there's a recent graduate webpage there as well. It's meant to be a starter set. I'm not going to put everything in there, it'd be exhaustive. But for example, I was in there yesterday. I'm looking at Intel Capital. They invest a boatload of money across a ton of startups. And what they have on the webpage that's posted in svbig.org is all those companies they've invested in and all the opportunities in those companies they've invested in. And when you go in there, you can go by company, type of job, the physical area you want to work, the geography you want to work, Palo Alto, Menlo Park, Indiana, the East Coast, Atlanta, and see what jobs post up. But there's quite a few jobs readily available. The specific requests I get from clients out here, whether it be Aruba or Cisco or Oracle or Google or the big gorillas, I funnel those requests to the Office of Professional Placement right there on campus. I work directly with some of the engineering advisors like Dave Cotterman. And then there's a lot of these student orgs, which are very well connected to help find candidates. But usually the handshake that happens after that is the companies don't want me in the middle or anyone else. They want the student to apply directly to the job. Utilize LinkedIn. Someone had mentioned that earlier. It's spectacular. And the way I would tell you to go about it is this. If you're looking for a job in a specific company, you can go to LinkedIn, go to Purdue University, and then start sorting down, and you can go by geography, you can go by company, and you can find the Purdue grads that are there. And then if you get your premium account, as mentioned earlier, you can have privileges on sending them, reaching out to them to get a connection. And I think that's just superb. I do it, and I do it to try to get linked into their hiring channels. The Bay Area Alumni Org out here is led by Adam Crum. He's doing a fabulous job. In fact, Adam is hosting a meeting I don't think it's scheduled, but it's not too distant future, where Purdue alumni that have gotten laid off in this COVID time, he's matching them with Purdue alum that are hiring. And so he's doing this online, it'll be a live exchange. I'm fascinated by it. I'm going to learn more about it on Thursday. A lot of great resources on campus, the CCO, the Career Center office. Make sure you're in Simplicity, where companies go to look for students that are graduating. The Office of Professional Practice and the advisors, et cetera. And then get plugged in, student orgs, the industry orgs. Warm handoffs are the name of the game and give you a real edge in getting an interview and launching into some of these companies. So network. Thank you, Young.
Thank you. All right, so this is what we're going to do. If you have any questions, please type in the chat. But I do have a few questions people submitted earlier. Now I'm going to unmute all the panelists. And then let me just unmute all the panelists. Peter, Rich, Steve already unmute, and Wade already unmute. Okay. First, thank all the panelists and thank all the audience. What I have heard so far is there are a lot of opportunities. It's not actually it's very exciting now. Okay. Yeah. All right. So, does any panelist want to answer any of the questions I sent earlier, or I choose one of them based on whatever? Any panelists want to answer any questions first? Okay,
I don't have the list in front of me, so you'll need to read it for me.
Okay, there are quite a few questions. I'm just choose some of them. I think one question is, what additional skills may be useful we traditionally do not focus on developing? What additional skills will be useful?
So this is Rich. I can address that a little bit. So one of the things, people, hiring managers particularly look for is good people skills. And it's something that let's face it, a lot of Purdue grads are engineers and emphasize all the math and science and, what programming languages they know and all of that. And that's important, but, frankly, it's the communications, the interpersonal skills that are so important in the long run. And companies actually put more emphasis on that than they do on just the technical skills. So I would emphasize that. And then the other thing I'd point out is, differentiate yourself. Figure out what you have that most people don't have, an unusual concatenation of capabilities. If you speak Japanese, then try to figure out what companies would like that unique capability of your engineering experience and your fluency in Japanese, or something like that, some passion you have or some different capability you have that allows you to stand out. And in the toughest times, that it's that combination that's going to really help you out of finding something where you're different and it really matters to the hiring manager.
So I'll just jump in to build on what Rich said, because having worked in large organizations, I was oftentimes tasked with building out parts of technical functions and so forth and identifying those key candidates to fill jobs. And the people skills are really, really important. Don't underestimate that. And that is an area that I think most universities don't really build on in terms of their traditional programs. But the other thing that I'll say on top of that is that your mindset and how you think about yourself is so important to having the confidence and the ability to walk in the room and know that you have something to offer. And I think that's a really important point that oftentimes gets missed. And you hear people talk about imposter syndrome or fake it till you make it. I think, Wade, you even touch base on that, which is important, but being successful in moving through those kinds of times when you don't feel like you have enough information and data, that all goes right back to how confident you are in yourself. And one of the things that Peter and I mentioned when we were on campus earlier this year is you need to be your own best friend. You need to support yourself in your thinking and not question everything about, oh gosh, I could have done this better and so forth. You need to really believe in what you did and that you did try hard. And your best friend's probably not going to cut you down by the knees. They're probably going to put their arm around you and say, hey, you know, you really did a good job. You worked really hard. Maybe it didn't work so great, but you did a good job. You need to give yourself credit for things like that, especially now when things are a little tougher, because that's how you do stand out, because you have that confidence when you walk in the room. And everybody knows it if you have it, and they also know when you don't.
Yeah, what I would add to that is, I mean, if I just go write down the list when I interviewed people, what I look for, innovation, show me an example of how you innovated, show me an example of your leadership. Are you a fast learner? Can you demonstrate that for me or tell me how an experience you had? I want a team player. I need people that have good, as Rich and everyone said, good interpersonal skills, but they're a team player. I need self-starters, people that can initiate stuff and follow through with it. Then you have your obvious stuff, your skills and your projects experience and that type of stuff. But that, and then the interpersonal communication. But that's kind of the basket that I think people look for.
Another point I'll add on to that is remember, it's what you can do for them. You know, too many first-time candidates come in and they go, well, I'm looking for something where I can do this. Well, you know, it's not about you. It's about the company. You know, you work for them. This is sales 101, guys. You're selling yourself. You're the product. And in sales, you want to try to help the customer with their needs, not just cram your product down their throat. So understand what the hiring manager's needs are and how you can help address them. Don't just try to cram you as a product down their throats.
Matthew, it's customer discovery 101, right? You're trying to find what the problem is that they need to solve.
Absolutely. And I think particularly in tough times, it's really important to be able to present how you can really add value. So you always got to think of yourself as a consultant. So how are you actually going to contribute to making the company that you want to hire you to be more productive, more effective, more profitable? Do the research on them. If you're looking for kind of a template, go to McKinsey's website. McKinsey is very explicit about the skill set that's required of the people that they hire. And it is things like leadership, it is interpersonal skills, it is problem solving skills, and the ability to take all of the technical skills that you've learned and knowledge that you've learned at Purdue and then translate that into doing something of value to the company. So your interview should be very much asking them, about what their goals and objectives are and trying to understand how you can contribute to helping them achieve those.
I got to go ahead.
Yeah, one other thing I would add, I put together a slide deck of about 15, 20 pages on how Purdue engineering students should do technical interviews. It lists a whole bunch of pointers on it. I'd be more than happy to forward that to you. I was supposed to be at Purdue in April and give it live, but never transpired. But I'd be happy to send you that deck, and maybe you could send it out to folks on the webcast.
Okay, great. There was a question for Rich about how do you figure out what's the company's cash flow and performance in general. Rich, do you want to answer that question?
Sure. Well, if they're public, then you can get their financials, and I'm not going to give you a quick crash course in finance here. Maybe you need to take one, but there's ways to analyze an annual report and figure out what cash flows are with some, you have to make some assumptions because everything did change. But if revenue drops to zero, how much of their cash burn can they cut? For startups, that can be a little more difficult. You can go to, Crunchbase or some of these other online sites and see who just raised money recently or how long ago they raised it. And just networking and asking around about, who's doing well. But just think about things too. Think about what businesses are growing and what aren't. But the startups, it's a little harder to dig that out. If you have contacts with some venture capitalists, sometimes they can tell you they have a finger on the pulse of the valley here, or call Steve.
That's right.
Sorry, Steve, I couldn't resist.
Can I add to that? Is use the Purdue library. We spend millions of dollars on databases. We do a lot of research in the area of finance, both for established companies and new companies. And there may well be databases there which can provide you that information. And we have information consultants at the library that are really happy to help you with that. So do use, if you're paying tuition, you already paid for this stuff. So I always tell students that after you've paid your tuition, your next best investment is a portable hard drive, and you should download everything you can from the library because it's going to get real expensive when you graduate, but it's all free right now.
Sure.
There's a question from Catherine, who's beginning the study. What is something you should do at Purdue and help me in the future? I guess this is open to all the panelists.
Sorry, ask the question again.
The question is, as someone who is at the beginning of the study, what is something that I can do at Purdue now that will help me in the future?
I'll jump in quick. I think one of the things that's really important for students who are just getting started, thinking ahead to the years out when you're going to be graduating, is get involved in student organizations, because that's a great way for you, one, to meet some new friends, get to know some different parts of the university that you would have never been involved with. Because these are going to be friendships that'll last you for a good number of years, probably decades. But the other thing that's important is it will also enable you to start to build the skill set of networking and reaching out to people that you don't know and learning new things, because that all contributes to the whole agile mindset and looking at assumptions and trying to make change, because these are all skills that you'll be using once you get out in the workplace and you get to really practice and have fun with it when you're at school. So I think student groups are great. I think, if you're in the residence hall system, they've got some great programs there. And I think, depending on where you're going to be studying, I think reaching out to different interest groups within, say, College of Engineering, or if you're over at Cranor, elsewhere, there's groups within those different parts of the university as well. So.
On the entrepreneurial side, there are fraternity of men and women in entrepreneurship. There's a club, I guess, the Anvil of students who are interested in entrepreneurship. So there are clearly opportunities to learn more about that from other student peers. As Beth said, I would heartily recommend getting involved in student organizations. It's an opportunity to meet different kinds of people, to broaden your experience in the field. I would certainly recommend that you look for opportunities for leadership. I think part of what differentiates Purdue University from Purdue Global, just to choose another brand, is that opportunity to do things with people in a place. And gosh, I just think you're wasting 4 years of your time if you're not intimately involved with lots of things going on around the university. I also know one of the things that's always hard, and I'm sure it's the same in engineering as it was in pharmacy, but it's really hard to find time for classes other than your core curriculum. I take a philosophy class, critical thinking. We were talking about earlier, skills that are important. Critical thinking is such an important factor in business success, and philosophy and other courses can help you with that as well. So I look for as many opportunities to do different kinds of things as you can.
We actually have a vendor card here. He is from the Silicon Valley Boiler Innovation Group. I think everybody, every panelist knows him. So Steve, do you want to say a few words? Oh. Steve?
He's muted.
No, I just unmuted him. Steve? I guess he preferred to be quiet for now. Okay. All right. There is another question I think that is a good one. From somebody posted earlier. How do you feel about your career planning? Does it work out?
Yeah, I can answer that one. So my first time I graduated was in food science and human nutrition. So since then, I've run manufacturing plants. I've done consulting from computers. I've run a consulting company. I've run a software company, and now I'm an author. So absolutely no relationship from where I started to where I ended up. And part of that is just being open to opportunities that come up and really following what's important to me. And what's important to me changes over time, changes hugely over time. And if you don't pay attention to what's important to you, you're going to find yourself in a place that you don't want to be anymore. You might have thought you wanted to be there, but you didn't. So it's important to pay attention. Now, some people do exactly what they want their whole life and they enjoy it. That just wasn't for me.
Or me.
Yeah, or me. Very similar path. I think probably most of us start up a big company.
There's a fine line, though. You do have to do some planning. You can't just get up every morning and expect opportunity to land in your lap. And you do have to do your homework. You have to decide what classes you're going to take in college, and and have some direction of what you do, not a hodgepodge of classes just because I thought it sounded like fun. But when you get out there in the world, if you're just so heads down that you miss opportunities around you that maybe weren't right on what you were thinking, then you will miss great opportunities. As you've heard from the panelists here, I think all of us had major pivots in their career. I mean, frankly, one of the reasons I did a startup company is I got passed over for a promotion, and was kind of pissed, and I hadn't been looking for a job, but then this startup opportunity landed in my lap. I was the right guy for it, and we grew it into a huge public company. And I don't think I would have been as open to it if I hadn't been kind of upset about being passed over for a job they gave to somebody else. So keep your eyes open, and again, doesn't mean you don't have a plan, but be open to a change of plan if the right opportunity presents itself.
I'd add to that is to have a time horizon for an exit strategy. And so when you're looking at an opportunity, sort of think about, where is it going to take me in 2 to 3 years' time, if that's your particular time horizon, either within that company, or is it going to give me some skills, give me some, build a network, build me some capabilities that I can leverage into something else. So every stage in your career is creating opportunities. And if you don't see that job is going to help you, create more opportunities, it's probably not a good thing. You're going to get stuck in a rut. So always sort of think just as a business does. So always have an exit strategy in mind, and make sure the exit is better than the one you're exiting from.
No down rounds.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is earlier in your career is when you should be taking all the risk or most of the risk. If you choose to get married and have kids, a little more nerve-wracking to go out and take big risks. So this is the time in your life to do it.
Exactly.
I'm going to read 2 more questions, then we can all go home. I think the 2 questions combined from 2 questions. From the first question is, what kind of technologies do you expect after the COVID situation? And another question related is, what kind of aspect do you expect to last after COVID-19? So the first question is about what technology will be successful. Second question is, what do you think the change will last?
I think the ones that are going to be less touch points, how do you streamline operations, and how do you deliver to the customer what's important to them? If it's important to them not to go to Whole Foods, but to get it delivered to their door, that's why Amazon can't hire fast enough. I mean, those types of things, I think, are going to be big drivers.
I'll riff off of that and say I think robotics is going to really take off. I mean, it's been moving, but this is going to be an accelerator for it. You know, we're seeing it like in retirement homes now, where they're trying to keep these old folks locked down so they don't get exposed to stuff. But who delivers the pills? Who delivers the food? And there's a bunch of startups that have had robots for delivering food and pills and stuff, and they've had a little bit of traction and people trying it, and all of a sudden now it's just going to take off. Same with factories and other delivery services, the warehouse picking robots to help Amazon be more productive. Robotics is just going to really take off after this.
Yeah, in the medical field, telemedicine, it's the same driver. But an area that not very long ago was really dismissed and poo-pooed by physicians, all of a sudden now telemedicine companies are growing like weeds.
Yeah. I would also throw in energy and transportation are going to be hugely big issues to deal with. And while that's certainly not an area I know a lot about, I can just say, having lived in a very congested area out here in the Bay Area, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to really prefer working off their computer than sitting in a car for an hour, 2 hours, or a bus. So I think that the whole concept of being someplace is going to take on a whole different set of meanings, especially in the workplace, because people right now are pretty much at home. And I think that creates opportunities because, as you just heard, there's a lot of assumptions that really just don't matter at this point, or they're vastly different in terms of where we need to go forward. So I think that's an area that's ripe for some kind of disruption.
I would think just things along the supply chain are probably ripe for disruption. I think we've learned the challenges of our just-in-time supply maybe is a little more challenged. Whether it's overseas manufacturing or how to get product to people rapidly, we'll take a serious look.
Domestic versus outsource.
Right.
And you might even take that one step further to go into local. So I think there's going to be a little bit more of a shift to local as well. I think there's going to be people that say, no, I don't need to buy this from China. The guy down the street can make it almost as good, and I like that idea better.
It's true. There's a lot of people talk about additive manufacturing. 3D printing is an area that will go along with that.
It's a good opportunity to advertise for our next panel. It's still being planned, but we are planning a panel for supply chain technologies. The date has not been finalized yet. So please subscribe to our mailing list. You can go to the JMEC website. The last question for today, I think it's probably summarize a lot of things many people mentioned, is having mentor is emphasized for career development. With LinkedIn and reach out to alumni, all great. But can you share some ideas on what can be asked for the mentors and how to keep the conversation with that going for a long period of time?
So let me just jump in quickly and say, I think a mentor relationship is something that can be short or long term. I don't think there's any expectations one way or another. But I do think the thing that is really key to it is that there's a good connection. And I would say mentors are the people that you think you can learn the most from. And I think mentors will share with you if there's a sense of you guys have the same connection point, interest, energy, whatever it is. I think that's what sustains a longer term mentor relationship. You're both getting something out of it. receiving and flip it around. Sometimes you're receiving and giving. So I think that's the way you need to look at it. And by the way, I would also say have lots of mentors. Don't just have one.
Right on.
Yeah, I'll make two comments. I think particularly in your first job, having a great mentor is one of the most important things. If you get two different job offers and one of them you think is going to be a great mentor and the other one you don't, absolutely take the one with the mentor. So many people don't get mentors. You know, they have a boss, but there's a difference between a boss and a mentor. You know, my first boss, you know, gave me a review once a year, and I never got any other feedback other than maybe he'd tell me to do something differently now and then. You want somebody who you can ask why, and you can have discussions and real dialogue about why do we do things, and you won't feel like you're asking stupid questions. And they really are there not just to get productivity out of you, but they want to see you grow and be successful. That's what a mentor is. So, you know, find a mentor. I mean, really seek them out. And it doesn't have to be a boss. It can be someone else in the organization. It can be a peer if they've been there years longer than you and, you know, have been around the block. But ideally somebody who's a level or two above you. You don't ever want to flaunt it because other people will resent, like if you're the teacher's pet kind of thing. So you never want to do that. And then a little advice, you know, Bill Campbell is a guy who's probably the best known Silicon Valley mentor. And he literally mentored the guys at Google and Steve Jobs at Apple and just a bunch of luminaries. And people would say, well, how did you decide who you would mentor? And he said, I mentor really smart people who listen. The problem is a lot of really smart people, they don't listen. They think they know all the answers. They already think they you know, like I've been told I'm smart all my life, so I don't need a mentor. But the smartest people know that they don't know everything and that there's still something to learn. So find a mentor, but then listen and deeply listen to what they have to say.
Yeah, I'd like to add though, I think there's a difference between being a mentor, which is what Rich is talking about, someone that you can continue to work with, and the opportunity that LinkedIn affords us, right? LinkedIn affords us to, and you students, gives you an opportunity to reach out to people that you wouldn't normally talk to. You might or might not establish a mentor relationship, but at least you can establish some level of contact and you can ask for advice, you can ask for questions. I get pinged every once in a while. But I guess the most important thing when you ping somebody out there on LinkedIn is to respect their time, but most importantly, do what they suggest or at least follow up. It's amazing how when you guys ask for questions, we give you a answer, we don't hear anything back. So if you want to establish a relationship on LinkedIn, make it both ways. Make sure that you're contributing to the conversation. You're not just asking the question and then you just go away. It's important that you establish something to keep the thing going because you'll be amazed at how that differentiates you and shows that you care, that you want to make a difference. And that makes us want to pay more attention to you.
I'd echo what Peter said, be grateful and be respectful. So if someone is taking a personal interest in you and helping, do appreciate that, demonstrate your appreciation for that, but also, you know, don't communicate 18 months later out the blue, having not communicated with them at all. So manage the relationship and they've been generous enough with their time, appreciate that, but also, you know, let them know what the impact of their advice and guidance has been on you. So, I mean, as a mentor, it's extremely satisfying to hear back, knowing that something you said or something you did has really made an impact on someone. It's going to encourage you to maintain that relationship as opposed to, gee, I haven't heard from you for 2 years and now you come for more advice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, be nice.
So, well, thank everybody. Now everybody gets one more sentence to say.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to say one more sentence of advice?
I'll say stay positive.
Right.
Use the Clorox on your counters, not in your lungs.
That's right.
be persistent.
That's right.
I'll say it's important
Yep.
to know what you want and to keep that as a vision for yourself.
And be
That's
your best friend.
Yeah, it's the old adage about figure out what your North Star is and follow it, pursue it.
Yeah. It'll change.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much. I also want to thank the audience for the participation. I hope you learned something from the panelists. I hope everybody stay healthy and safe. If you have any questions or suggestions, let me know. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.